What's going on? Welcome to the MoAir podcast where you get to tell your aviation story. You're probably wondering, what's this podcast about? And who's this guy? Well, I'm Robby Green, your host, and the MoAir podcast is a place where we get to come together and share our aviation stories. Before we get into my aviation story, I'm going to share my goals and dreams for this podcast. My goal for the MoAir podcast is not only to have a place where people can come and tell their stories and their struggles and everything along their journey, but also have a place where we can get together when we can't be together. A place where we can share ideas, help coach each other, and hopefully have respectful conversations that might help somebody in their own journey. If you're thinking that aviation is only a thing for the privileged and the wealthy, well, I thought so too, but that couldn't be more wrong. There's people from every social class that's in aviation, and I hope these stories where people share their struggles and share their triumphs are going to help people who think that they can't be in the aviation world and show them that they can be. That's my favorite thing about aviation, actually, is it doesn't matter what social class that you're from. It doesn't matter if you're really wealthy and rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. If you're in aviation, you're family. And I want to try to grow that here. So please join me, grow with me, be a part of the MoAir family. With this podcast, we're going to be bringing in people from student pilots to commercial pilots to AMPs, IAs, ground crew at the airports, hopefully some FAA inspectors or ramp agents. Hopefully we can even get some people that are manufacturers for aircraft or parts. It doesn't matter what your background is in aviation. I want you to join the MoAir podcast family. So go ahead and go to moairsales.com, fill out the contact form, and reach out to me. And I'll reach back out to you and get you on the podcast just to share your story. Now, my aviation story, it starts back whenever I was a very little kid. I come from a small town where there's no aviation involved. There's not even an airport within probably 20 miles till you get to Buffalo, which is the big town where I went to high school. However, we were close enough by air to some military bases that we saw military aircraft all the time. So I was always up looking at the sky, dreaming about being in an airplane one day, just flying around free, just enjoying the sights from above. But I had no idea what it was even about or if I would be scared. So my grandma took me to Bolivar Airport where she knew a guy named Paul Evans back whenever I was real little. And Paul took us up for a flight in his little Cessna. And I was so excited the entire time. I didn't think twice about going. It was just all go for me. So we get there, get in his airplane. He does his run up and all that stuff. And I don't remember any of that really. I just remember looking around at the inside of this thing thinking, wow, this is insane. I've never seen anything like this before. I've never been in anything like this before. And then we take off down the runway and it starts disappearing below our feet. And I was hooked. I was hooked from that point on. I just knew that I had to be in aviation at some point in my life. Flying around up there, I'm looking outside, not even really paying attention to what happens inside the airplane. There was a bunch of gauges that I didn't know what they were. I didn't know how any of it worked. I was just happy to be there. And then Paul let me have the flight controls, so I flew around for a little bit thinking I was doing some great stuff. But, obviously Paul was the one doing most of the flying. I was just there pretending. But I felt like I was flying a rocket ship at that age. And we did some turns, which obviously I couldn't reach the rudder pedals, so if they were coordinated, Paul was doing that for us. But it was the one thing that I'll never forget, going up in that little Cessna. And one thing I remember very vividly is the old air valves or the vents that are up in the wing struts of the Cessnas. That's how you used to get cold air in. You would just pull it out a little bit and it had like a cutout, and that would direct the air into the cabin. So I remember that we'd pull it out because it was a hot day, and a bunch of air would come in. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, and then one shot out and hit me on the leg. And I didn't know what to think about it, and Paul made some joke about gotcha or something funny like that. And I'll just never forget that thing coming out of there. And I thought the whole thing was going to fall apart, but it really was just the air vent popping out because of the air pressure. That flight just got me hooked, and I went on through my middle school and high school career not really thinking much about aviation because I didn't have the money for it, so I thought. And it was just not attainable. I grew up in a small town where nobody goes anywhere. Nobody really like does anything really cool like that. Everybody just gets a job, settles down in that area, and creates a great life with a good family. It's a small town living. My grandma and my mom had different ideas. They started looking into aviation colleges, which I didn't know existed at the time. So we talked about Sparta, we talked about all these other aviation colleges, UND, all that other stuff. But we ended up choosing UCM, University of Central Missouri, here in Missouri in Warrensburg. And it was a fantastic flight school. I loved every minute of it. It was just a great time. I joined as a pro pilot major, and very first day you get up there, you go through all your classes, you go out to the airport, you meet up with your flight instructor, start doing some ground stuff. He takes you for an introductory flight. It was just amazing that I was actually living my dream of being in aviation. Fast forward a couple years into that, I got my private license, I got my instrument rating, I was working on my commercial license, everything was going great, and then life threw a curveball, and things changed, obviously, so I couldn't afford to do pro pilot anymore. Really didn't want to be gone all the time. No, like just thinking the commercial side of aviation for the big airlines. I didn't want to be gone as a young pilot, not at home, not with my family, that kind of thing. And I didn't really know the other sides of aviation at that time. So I didn't know that there was corporate aviation. I didn't know that there was other commercial jobs that you could do other than flight instruct and fly for the airlines. So I switched my major to flight ops management, mostly because of money, but I got a bachelor's degree in aviation management at UCM, and I finished out my schooling there. I got my tailwheel endorsement, which was awesome. Flew with Bill Runyon to get that, who everybody thought was scary and mean, but Bill was a great dude. He'd do anything for anybody. He actually was one of my favorite instructors to fly with, just because you knew if you passed with Bill, you did something good because you didn't mess up at all. Bill was by the book, and that's how you make great aviators, is you stick to the guidelines and you hold people accountable for things that they did wrong. At UCM, I had a bunch of great flight instructors. Some of the ones that come to mind was like Paul Yeomans, Greg Lernchus, and my very first flight instructor, who I will never forget, was Brent Scheib. Brent Scheib, we did all kinds of fun stuff in the airplane. Practice a lot of emergencies. He would turn the autopilot on sometimes when I wasn't paying attention inside the cockpit. So I'm sitting here fighting the autopilot without thinking about it. There was times where he would reach up underneath the panel with his foot and start pushing on the yoke where they come together at. And, I'd have to try to figure out what was going on there. Or during a night flight one time, he turned off the switches for all of our lights. So he simulated a failure there. And we had to land the airplane with no interior cab lights, which was tough, but fun. He also simulated a bunch of electronic failures, so landing with no flaps, power off landings, engine out landings, those kind of things. It was just a great time, but I learned so much that still sticks with me to this day. I also, like most people, made some mistakes and probably did some things that I wasn't supposed to do. So, Brent, if you're listening to this, please don't get mad. I know it's been a while. Hopefully the statute of limitations for your grudges are gone. However, I think it was my first solo cross country. I made a bad mistake that, looking back, I probably never should have done. And if anybody is watching this, just know your limits, okay? Let's start with that. So I went flying for a cross country from UCM, which is Kilo Romeo Charlie Mike, to Vermilion in Columbia. I'm pretty sure that's where it's at. So I was flying from UCM to Columbia, and it's the airport that's right on the river, so it sits above I-70 and below the river, or vice versa. Either way, one side's a river and one side's the road. So basically just followed I-70 all the way there. It was great. Good VFR day. However, when I get there, the winds were too high, way too high, and it was pretty much a direct crosswind. I come in the pattern, doing a left-hand pattern like you're supposed to do, come over the highway and some parking lots, and it shoots me way up because I get some updrafts from the heat. So I pull the power, get back down to pattern altitude, trying to reset up for the landing, and I'm in the pattern. So put my first notch of flaps in, pull the power back out, start coming over to where I'm going to turn base, and I go over the river. And what happens when you go over water, you just hit some downdrafts because of the cool air, right? Go over this big body of water, sink real far down, freak out, throw some power in. I'm like trying to get my marbles about me. I don't know what's going on, but I'm still continuing in. which probably wasn't the best idea. I should have probably done the lap in the pattern at this point. But I am the greatest student pilot there ever was at this point in my mind. So I'm thinking, I got this, right? Turn final, get everything else all set up for landing, make sure all my stuff's good to go. And here I come in, landing, and I keep getting blown across. So I'm crabbing into the wind. I get close to the runway touchdown area to get a gust of wind. It blows me off the side into the grass area. So I full power it up, go around, start gaining a little bit of airspeed, start gaining a little bit of altitude, first notch of flaps up, do a good go around, try to just settle myself a little bit. At this point, I'm really nervous. I don't know what I'm doing. Should I land? Should I go home? If I go home without touching down, it doesn't count. So I have to redo this. This is a lot of money for me. So I make a bad decision and I say, I'm going to go around, come in, and I'm going to land this thing today because I'm making this flight count. I don't want to pay for it again. So that's what I did. I came in, I had a lot of crosswind corrections in. The winds were way too high for me, but I landed anyways, and it was a little sketch. So I take a minute, I get to the ramp, shut the airplane down, get out, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water. Somebody at the airport comes up to me and he's like, man, it's really windy out there today, huh? I'm like, yeah, it's real windy. Didn't tell him I was a student pilot, didn't tell me like that. Just kind of stuck to myself because at this point I was still kind of shaky from the landing. Go back out to the airplane, start the airplane up. I didn't think about calling my flight instructor and telling him that I got there safe, which I was supposed to do, but I didn't because I was so freaked out from the landing. Get back in the airplane, taxi back to the runway, go to takeoff, and the winds are still too much for me. So I got as much crosswind control in as I can. I full power it. The nose kind of comes up off the ground and it starts to scoot a little bit. So when I feel it start to scoot, I know that I'm getting kind of light on the tires. And I decided to do basically a soft field takeoff at this point. I pop it up off the ground, stay in ground effect. The wind pushes me over off the runway into the grass in between the taxiway and the runway. And I'm just kind of trying to fight my way back over the runway while staying in ground effect and not turning too much. Try to use rudders and ailerons to stay coordinated. And I eventually get enough airspeed to get back over the runway and take off. And I made it out of there with the fresh pants still somehow. I don't know how. But flew all the way back to UCM. UCM had crossing runways, so I had a decent runway to land on there with not too much of a crosswind. Go turn my books in, talk to my flight instructor. I think he knew, but I'm not 100% sure if he ever knew. I'm sure he did check the weather there. But I made it there and back safe. However, not a good idea. Know your limits, okay? Because that could have turned out really bad. And I know that now, but at the time I just wanted to get it done. Get there itis is a real thing, and it's terrible. So hopefully somebody can learn from my mistake. And if the weather is too bad for you, don't hesitate just to go home. You can do the flight again another day, but if you push it too much, you might not get the opportunity to do the flight another day. So after I got out of college, I became a state trooper in Missouri, and still wanted to fly. Really wanted to fly for the Highway Patrol, but once again, life had other plans, and I left the Highway Patrol to go work for the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is where I currently work. But aviation has never left my bloodstream. I've always wanted to get back into it. And now I just fly for fun. So I would like to eventually end up getting my own airplane and flying me and my family around, me and my wife and kids. We'd fly around the country and enjoy general aviation and go on trips and all that kind of fun stuff. But my aviation journey didn't quite go the way I planned it. If you're interested in sharing your aviation story, maybe some struggles you had along the way, something you learned, maybe even just talk about how your dreams changed once you got into aviation because you learned about another facet of aviation that you didn't know existed at the time. That would be awesome. Go to the Mo Air Sales website, fill out the contact form. I'll get back with you, and we'll sit down and have a conversation and go through your story. My aviation journey isn't over. So this is a new chapter of my aviation journey, trying to start this podcast. And I hope that you all join me and grow with me and kind of even help support me throughout the way, because I am not a videographer. I'm not a podcaster. I'm not even a good public speaker. I know that the more we do something, the better we get at it. So I have the vision to bring people together, to create a network that's going to help everybody in aviation and I want you guys to be part of that network. Join the Moair family. We got some good guests coming up soon, and that's all I got for you guys today. So keep flying, and always remember, success starts with a positive attitude.